Hi, everyone. My name is Jess Massiangelo, and I am the Global Business Development Director here working at Impetus Digital. At Impetus, we believe all new great ideas start with a conversation. Our online collaboration platform is the perfect place for not just starting these conversations, but also for continuously building on the ideas and insights generated over time while creating authentic relationships with the partners in the process. Having these big, courageous conversations is how we can start to implement change and positively disrupt healthcare. In this podcast series, we will be talking to some of the brightest minds in the life sciences industry to get their take on how to be an effective leader, navigate digital transformation, and ultimately enhance patient care. Today, I am joined by Danielle Portnik, who is currently the Regional Business Director for International with Ambry Genetics. Danielle leads the business development strategy for Ambry's precision medicine offering in several geographies, including Canada and Europe. She has held roles across the pharmaceutical space in product management, marketing, medical affairs, and account management, where she has led Canadian affiliate strategy and execution for drug and medical device portfolios. She is also the co-founder and president of the board of directors for the first Canadian Healthcare Businesswomen's Association, HBA. Thanks for being here with us today, Danielle.
Thanks for having me, Jess.
Yeah, so really to start off, wondering what are some of the key leadership lessons you have learned during your career thus far?
Yeah, great question. There's been a couple. I've tried to pull it down to, or I'll pull it down to, I guess, the top three that really come to mind. And I think the first is really, you may go faster alone, but you'll definitely go further together. I think if we take ourselves back to university and you think about how so much of what you did was individual work, and you, in some cases, you dreaded group projects because you never really knew who you were going to end up with and how they worked and if that worked well or not. And in some way, it sort of creates this do-it-yourself mindset. And that works to a point, until you start to grow in your role, you grow in the scope that you cover, or you grow in terms of leadership, and you just simply either don't have the capacity to take it on, or you're trying to avoid burnout, both of which obviously we want to try and avoid. So, I think for me, understanding how and where you can really rely on the diversity of perspective around you, on the expertise around you, that was probably one of the biggest things that I took as I sort of moved through my career. And I would highly and strongly suggest that everybody think about that for really any project that you're working on or any part of the business, even if it's something you might end up doing by yourself. If you have an opportunity to pull in different perspectives, that can actually really change the way you approach that challenge or approach that situation, which may actually help you to achieve an even more impactful result than you had initially intended. I think the second one for me is really, leading has really very little to do with your role and your title and a lot to do with your actions. I think we often talk about leading in this sort of binary fashion. You're either with authority or you're leading without authority. And, I really think that leadership is just, it's so much more than that. Like, it really is about, what you say, how you say it. Are you authentic? Do you demonstrate integrity, empathy? Are you a partner to your team? Are you, in the trenches or really supporting them in some way, like a true ally? And not just when it counts, but day to day. It's really not just what you can teach others, but what you can learn from those around you. And I think as, really great leaders, you're always learning and you always understand that you're sort of a part of the system, no matter what role or title or whatever it is that you hold. And I think the last one for me is be human and show it. I think there's this long-standing saying of it's lonely at the top. Well, I think it's only lonely at the top if people feel they can't talk to you anymore, they can't communicate because someone might be more junior and you might be more senior. So I think it's sort of incumbent upon everyone, as you continue to succeed in your career, you continue to move up the ladder, to just keep that in mind and really make the effort to be human, to be seen as human, to share that we're all in this together. We all have our challenges, we all have the hills that we face, but at the end of the day, we're never alone in that. We always have other people going through similar things. And so, when we remember that, when we showcase that, when we make people feel that they can come to us, talk to us, no matter again, what role, what title, what position you hold. It's incredible, I think, what we can actually learn by sharing 30 minutes with someone, no matter what position they come in or no matter what area of the industry they come from.
Yeah, I love that and could not agree more. I think that obviously communication is really something that you touched upon. And when you're starting off in your career, hearing some of those key points that you have just mentioned, I think really can fast track you quickly in terms of really enjoying what you do, not getting that burnout, like you mentioned, and also being successful. So thank you for sharing that. Kind of keeping with that theme and keeping in, key leadership lessons that you're learning, but now applying it to, the world that we're currently living in with COVID-19. What would you say are some of your key leadership lessons that you've learned since COVID-19 has started, and has that affected anything so far?
Yeah, great question. I think one of the biggest things that to some degree we always worry about is how much do you communicate, and is it bad to over communicate? I think with COVID, one of the things that I learned is it's always better to over communicate. At the end of the day, your team will tell you if it's too much, and even better yet, tell them to tell you if it's too much.
Right.
But at least that way you're putting the ball in their court and they have the opportunity to actually let you know that, versus worrying about how much communication you should be getting and then ending up under communicating.
Yeah, absolutely.
For
I
me, it's
love
a
that.
really big one, just to make sure that you are still there enough. Even if you're not sort of visible, you're still visible. Would say a second one for me would be finding a new way to really maintain your open door policy. For me, I always said, if you've got something quick, just save everybody the time. Don't send me an email. Pop by. It's an opportunity for us to connect again, sort of to be human, to have a laugh, and to solve that problem at the same time. And I think, when you can't do that in person, you have to find new ways to have that connection, or to sort of have that level of accessibility that your team might need. And so for me, that was really turning my Skype Messenger system into my open door. So if someone needed something and I was free, you could Skype me anytime. And again, as long as I could reply, I would reply, or I'd pick up the phone and call them. And that really, really helped to just sort of maintain that connection, as I mentioned. And I actually had an intern who started with us in January last year. And, within a month and a half, we went to virtual. So I actually got that feedback from her, that was one of the things that really allowed her to connect with me and to feel that we had that great bond within our team. So that was really, really important. And I suggest everybody think about what that looks like for them within their organization. And I think maybe the third thing would be, and actually, I think this is probably the most important out of anything I might say here, but the foundational bond that you end up creating with your team is going to do way more for your collective output than four walls ever will. It's great that we really want people to be in an office. And yes, there are certain aspects of being in an office that I think you cannot replace. There are like those, as I said, those in-person interactions that really do help a team bond and bring people together. But at the same time, if you can establish that, if you can find other mediums that allow you to have that foundational bond, then your team is going to work hard. Your team is going to want to be successful as a team. They're going to want to show you that success and make you proud as their leader. It's sort of kind of ingrained in the way that the team functions, if you really take the time to make sure that you have that type of a relationship with all of your reports, or even with peers who are on your team. So more than anything, I think, we've learned that we can all work remotely. We know that this is possible. It really is about making sure that you've got that piece sort of at the center of that remote working to ensure your team has what they need from you to be successful.
Yeah, absolutely. That foundation and strong bond within the team is probably the most important thing. And you even touched upon it, and I know that I've experienced it, but communication is almost become even more important now in this new virtual world. And I feel like I'm personally communicating even more than I ever did before, because you kind of have to take that extra step and call someone or Skype them or Zoom them. And it's actually having some great impacts, I would say, to our business, and from feedback that I've heard from others to them as well. So certainly that's something that I'm seeing as well. So next question is around diversity within the pharmaceutical industry. So how can we really ensure more diversity in pharma, including, and really most importantly, the diversity of thought in such a highly regulated industry?
Yeah, this is my bread and butter. I think we can do so much more if we put the proper resourcing and focus behind this kind of an effort. And actually there is quite a bit of work starting to happen across the sector, which is really, really exciting for me to see. But, I think if I had to pick a couple things that we could do right off the hop, one would be start early. And I mean early, I mean like high school, universities, colleges. We actually need to bring people into the industry to actually have that diversity. We talk a lot about, how do we have diversity in senior leadership, or how do we have diversity on a board? Well, if we don't have diversity in our entry level positions, then we're definitely not going to have diversity when we get to senior leadership or to the board level. So we really need to have some sort of plan or focus on how do we actually bring that diversity in the first place, so that we can actually move the bar down the line. I think the second thing, and this may sort of seem a little bit counterintuitive to pharma, but go outside of pharma. We have incredible people in the industry, but there are also incredible people outside of our industry who can really give us that different perspective, or that unique perspective. I think when we think about hiring someone for a position, we tend to be very, very structured around specifically what we want. And, even as an example, within a disease state area, you might be looking at a role in dermatology. And if you don't have dermatology experience, perhaps you won't be considered. But maybe the fact that you don't have dermatology experience is actually what makes you more interesting, in that you're going to be coming from a different world. You're going to be coming with a different perspective. Maybe you don't have the contacts, but that perspective could just be that much more valuable. So I think if we look at people across the healthcare spectrum, and we really start to engage some of those people a little bit more, or we look at people who are sort of outside of, we'll call it the standard, what we would look for when hiring, I do really think that we can find some really unique perspectives, and just strong, incredible individuals who could really drive our industry forward. And maybe the last thing is, I honestly think as an industry, we need to stop trying to fix people. I can't tell you how many events, things that I've gone to where, we talk, for example, about women and imposter syndrome. And, there was a great Harvard Business Review article about this whole thing. Stop calling women imposters, stop doing these things that inadvertently sort of suppress or repress someone's sort of sense of themselves and their capabilities. If we actually want to ensure we have diversity, we don't need to fix the individual. We need to fix the system. If the system is broken, then trying to help individuals is only going to go so far. It really does need to be a top-down and bottom-up approach. It can't be one or the other. And so, when we think about COVID being a great, example of this in this pandemic, all of these jobs had to be in the office before the pandemic. And to your point, right, I think we've seen you don't actually necessarily have to be in an office to do a lot of the jobs that we do. So when we think about these jobs, are we actually limiting or restricting our talent pool by saying it's got to be in the office if it really doesn't? Could we actually be improving that diversity of our workforce or perspective if, we said this job could be remote? And maybe it's not, black and white, it's not in office or remote entirely. Maybe it's some sort of blend, right? Or some sort of compromise for that particular individual based on, what's happening in their home life. But I think if we can look at some of these, what I would think might be a fairly simple fix in some cases, we could probably bring in a lot of people that we're missing.
Yeah, I think all those points are so great. And what I really like about it is you're kind of asking these what we would consider provocative questions. And that's really what you have to do in order to diversify our thinking when we talk about these certain subjects. So I totally agree with all of your points. I think that it's a great start to the conversation, and hopefully we start to see a little bit more of that as time goes on.
Definitely.
So we have time for about one more question. And this is really around personalizing healthcare. So how do you think pharma can democratize and personalize healthcare for all patients?
Yeah, I think that's a big one.
It is a big one.
I think there's probably a lot that we could be doing. I think there are
Mhm.
some things that I'll say are maybe more obvious and things that we probably could start doing yesterday.
Yeah.
One would be bring it to the patient.
Mhm.
The way our healthcare system is set up right now, it's very, very centralized. And I get in many ways that makes a lot of sense. You've got your large academic institutions and everybody filters in, there when they need, X level of care. But, to some degree, it completely flies in the face of many of the social determinants of health, and that there are many reasons people can't get there or aren't comfortable going there or have had
Right.
certain experiences that prohibit them from going there. And so when we think about sort of our universal healthcare system, it sort of makes you wonder how universal is that really. And I think
Mhm.
if we want to talk about really having access for all, then we need to understand that centralization doesn't actually equal access for all. We need to look at how we do bring that out to the patient. And there's probably a number of ways that we can do that. I think the UK actually was a really good example in terms of their COVID vaccine rollout. They mobilized transport buses, like city
Mhm.
buses, and they used them as mobile vaccination clinics that went out through the countryside. That's such a simple example, but it
Yeah.
works. You're not asking people to travel 2 hours to get a vaccine. You're bringing it to them, and that's how we make sure we move forward. I think a second one is really the education piece. We know patients, people, all of us, we all do it. We go to Google. We
Mhm.
want to, find out
Yeah.
about our health. We're going to look into it. We have all of the tools at our disposal to do that. So why not? Right.
Mhm.
And, unfortunately, when you go do that, you get everything from, oh, you have a small cut to you have a tumor. And you don't really
Yeah.
know where you land in between. And so it actually, in many cases can create more angst than it actually creates good. So, I do think we need to find a way to really improve our ability to provide good, accurate education to the public, more
Mhm.
broadly speaking, and really allow patients to take that into their own hands and really be in charge of their health. Right now it's hard for a patient to get access to their entire health record because it's all over the place, definitely in Ontario. So, if we want patients to really be able to get the support that they need to know what that support is. So, I think it's incumbent upon those of us in the industry who, for lack of a better word, are in the know to
Mhm.
actually take that internal expertise and figure out how we translate that better externally. And we do it a lot around our products in particular disease spaces, or we support a particular disease area. But there has to be a way for us to look at how do we come together as a sector, so as healthcare, and
Mhm.
actually have a dialogue on this. How do we do this better across the entire system? And I don't have the answer for that, but I think that's exactly why we need that diversity of perspective. We need all these stakeholders at a
Yeah.
table so we can figure out what that looks like. And I think maybe the third thing is we have to figure out in this country how we do affordability with
Mhm.
business fiscal responsibility. So, companies have to be successful. They need to make money. They have to have revenue in order to have a business case to exist in Canada. People need to be able to afford their healthcare. So, of course, we have to balance these two things.
Mhm.
Right now, I think we've seen time and time again where, it's almost combative in some ways within the healthcare industry. There are some great examples of how we work together, but there are a lot of examples where we probably could do a little bit better of a job.
Mhm.
And again, I think this is one of those areas where we really need to bring all of the stakeholders together and go, okay, what are the gaps? What are the challenges? Almost like a SWOT. We almost need a SWOT
Yeah.
of our healthcare system, and then
Yeah.
we can sit back and go, okay, what are the quick wins? How do we fix this? Who fixes it? And start to actually build out from there so that we don't end up in a country where people can't get access to medications simply because they're not made available here. Or they can't get access in their province. So you have to go to another province to get funding, or whatever that might look like. I think that is going to be absolutely critical. And sort of within that as well, again, thinking about how do we get this out to the people, right? So when we make all these great changes, we can't just make these in our major cities. Like that's, yes, a vast majority of the population is there, but how do we actually take that outward? And that's something that actually in my new role is very critical to me. And how do we actually tell people or help people understand what their risk is so that they can make that informed decision, so that they can get in touch with the right people? Because if we don't fill out those other two things, then we're just going to continue down this road of band-aids. And unfortunately, band-aids aren't going to be the solution to this problem. So I think there's a lot we could probably do, but maybe that's just a couple and I'll stop there.
Yeah, no, that is honestly some great points and some really great thought starters. Obviously, lots of work and effort and collaboration needs to happen for any of those to actually become reality. But I think starting and having these conversations and, as we continue to make these points, that's when you start to see change. So a really great start to, I think, the future of what our industry will look like. So that is all the time that we have today. I really want to thank you, Danielle, for joining us. It was so great to learn more about you and your extremely successful career so far, as well as gain some insight on your thinking towards different, topics and leadership within the industry. So to the listeners, thank you so much for tuning in today. And as always, reach out with any questions or comments. We at Impetus always like to further these discussions and conversations. So until next time, have a great rest of your day, and we will talk again soon.